all a libertarian tries to say is that whenever the political machinery becomes active in the economy, it helps some people and hurts others. It redistributes the resources of the society in a certain way as to help some people and hurt others. And a libertarian would go further and say that, in contradistinction to the social democrat, the modern liberal, he would say that the redistribution of resources will help the people who are already rich, not the people who need it, not the people that the social democrats want to help. Look at the case of urban renewal. Here is something that people would call political. The government decided that certain areas were unfit for human habitation and proceeded to try to destroy them, wipe them out, clean them up, renew them. And interestingly enough, what was wiped out was lower income housing, and what was built was upper income housing. The people that got rich by it are the construction firms and so forth like that, the slum landlords that were paid very handsome prices for their property. The economic aspect is not absent in the political process.
I mean, you would argue as an extension of what you've said so far, you would argue that the private industry could operate the post office, as would seem to me, as well or better, or that maybe even hospitals should be run by a private corporation making a profit on hospitals.
I think hospitals is a sort of different industry. There's a very large element for
road building. What about
certainly the interstate highway system could be privately owned and run. There's limited access. You could set up very little charge. You could set up a toll booth or some other more advanced system of billing people who used it. There's no reason why the interstate highway system should be subsidized the way the city streets are. The city streets are owned by the government because there are costs of doing business. There are costs of charging. If you set up a toll booth on everybody's driveway and charge them a dime before they could use the street, the costs of charging would be too much. It would cost you $1 an hour to have a man stand there to collect that dime, which is paid twice a day. So some things can't be handled in a market. Some things it's cheaper, more economically efficient to give them away than it is to sell them. But something like the interstate highway system could certainly be private. The Pennsylvania Turnpike is making money hand over fist now. There's no reason why the rest of the roads in the United States couldn't be operated similarly. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that I've studied it and this is my opinion. I'm saying that things like this ought to be examined. There's no a priori reason why anything should be given away. And if you are determined to give it away, you should look and see whom you're giving it to. Are you giving it to the rich people that could buy it if you sold it? Or are you giving it to the poor people who might not be able to buy it, whom you might want to give it to?
Well, then what are the legitimate functions of the state?
Well, it's like I tried to back out of that a few minutes ago. It was perhaps the government should maintain a court system. Some libertarians argue that it could be handled privately, but I'm not quite that far out. There's some reason to believe the government ought to maintain a police force for enforcing, crimes of violence in the streets, making sure they don't happen. But a lot of things the police are doing could be done by private agencies also. There's no hallowed reason why the government ought to be exclusively in the business of apprehending criminals and preventing the destruction of property. Private police forces used to be much more common back in the 19th century when the government was less aggressive. The government would appoint a marshal and a deputy marshal for a certain area. And if a company really wanted to protect its property, it would hire a few Burns guards, that sort of thing. But a lot of that seems to be passing over to the government. I think to maintain order doesn't require that the government, take all that active a role. Order will maintain itself for the most part. But certain things which can't be handled by the market because it's too expensive to handle them by the market can sometimes be handled by direct organization instead. And the government is just another example of a direct organization. The reason business firms exist is because it's cheaper for them to bring certain activities inside their organization rather than dealing on the market for all of the bits and parts. And there are a few things in the general economy which the government can do best because it is one large corporation which doesn't depend upon selling its product to get its revenues.
And you don't feel that the government should have any regulatory influence over business and over the private economy at all?
It should have as much regulatory influence over the economy as, say, I have over you. I can expect or insist that you not physically assault me. Under certain circumstances, I could expect that you wouldn't verbally assault me. I could expect you wouldn't take my, steal stuff out of my pockets. And the government serves a legitimate function to make sure that private businesses don't do that to each other, to make sure that consumers don't do that to businesses, and to make sure that businesses don't do that to the people they deal with. But I don't think the government has any really useful function to perform in terms of really regulating the economy. Things like the Interstate Commerce Commission, things like the Civil Aeronautics Board, things like the Federal Communications Commission. These are all things that were set up in great moments of enthusiasm for government regulation, which in point of fact have done nothing in their 50 or 20 or 10 years of existence, except sort of protect and help enrich the people they're supposed to regulate.
Do you really think that there's a hope in this large and this mammoth organizational structure in the United States and in the governmental structure in the United States, that it can, in fact, become more libertarian?